We look at these first couple of verses 4 through 6 or so. We'll go into starting 4. And it says, "Hear, O Israel." And we're going to take that "Hear, O Israel." We're going to put that in our pocket. Okay, we're going to hold on to that. We'll come back to it later. And he goes and he said, "The Lord our God, the Lord is one." And what Moses is doing, he's kind of flashbacking. He's trying to help the Israelites remember some stuff that they've read and heard for a long time. This idea of God being their God. See, God chose the nation of Israel through the Abrahamic covenant or the Abrahamic covenant, if you're very seminary type. In fact, let's all say it together because it's so much fun. Abrahamic covenant. Yes, their father Abraham, God made a covenant with him, and God said that he would be Abraham's God, but he would also be the God of his descendants. See, God has a plan for the family. And so he says that, so Moses is up on this hill, and he's reminding the people that God is to be their God. He has chosen them. It's time for them to choose him to serve. Then he goes on to say, "The Lord our God, the Lord is one." Now he's telling them this is kind of a flashback to the 10 Commandments. The first commandment is like, don't put any other God before me. And the Israelites have kind of a reputation of like, wherever they are, they start looking at other people around them like, "Oh, you got a nice God. Well, I'm going to take your God a little bit. I'm going to worship your God. Ooh, a golden calf. Ooh, let me worship you." You know, they start going after all these different gods in their life, and Moses is going, "Look, the Lord our God, that who's one who's chosen up, he is to be the only God that we serve. Don't let all these distractions kind of take your time and take your energy. Worship God only." I want you to look at your family pages and your worship guides that you have, and you'll see on that first question I had you answer some of the things that you do. Now, I'm a firm believer that if you want to know where a person's heart is, you look at how they spend their money and how they spend their time. Look at their checkbook and their calendar. Because I think that if someone was watching a made-for-TV movie of your family and they were trying to determine what this family is all about, they would be watching all the things that you do. And if they see that you're doing all this, I don't know, sports, academics, creative stuff, none of that stuff is bad, but if that is what is taking all your time, and maybe there's a little time, about an hour, or today maybe an hour and 15 minutes on Sunday, they might go, I think they may worship the God of sports. Not this God they give that sort of hour and 15 minutes, really it's like 30 minutes in there. It's just a question. What does your time say about the God that you serve? Then he goes on into the next portion, and this is the one that really hits me. In fact, it hits me so much that I want you to do something with me. Everybody stand up. Stand up for just a second. I love doing memory motivators, things that help me remember important things. One summer I actually learned like the whole book of John doing memory motivators, and this is kind of motions that help me remember what's going on. So you're going to do this all together, and this is going to help you not only here but later on too. So just stick with me here, okay? So we put our hands up, we go, "Love the Lord your God. Love the Lord your God. With all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength." Let's do that again. Love the Lord your God. With all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Great, you can be seated. Moses says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength. And this is key, because what he's saying is you should love God with everything in you. Everything you do, everything you say, the way you dress, who you talk to, how you talk, should be about God. Should be doing what he does. And he says this, but then it gets real cool because he gets affirmed in his speech here by Jesus. If you will, look in your Bibles. Oh, very good. I like it. And we are going to look in Mark, which is the second book of the New Testament. You'll turn to Mark. And this is actually chapter 12, verse 28 through 30. And I'll read this. It says, "One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating." Jesus was having a debate with some Sadducees from an earlier section. And he heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, "Of all the commandments, which one is the most important?" And listen to what Jesus does here. He says, "The most important one?" "Yes, the most important one, Lord. What is it?" And he says, "Okay, it's this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength." Jesus quotes Moses. Basically, these cats came to him and they said, "Hey, if you could boil everything down into one thing, all the commandments of the law, everything that Moses wrote to us, if you can boil that down into one sentence, if you could only speak one sentence for the rest of your life to point people towards Christ, to obey God, what would it be?" And he says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength." This is the greatest commandment. See, Jesus understands that if he can get you to do all of that, if he can get you to love God with everything in you, he can get anything else done. That's the key. That's the pinnacle right there. And we need to live our lives in such a way that people around us even see that. I bet if you look on your list right now, the second question I asked you, what would other people say about you? I wonder if any of you have on there that people would say that my family, the Lloyds, loves God with everything in them, based on what they see. If they were watching a TV movie of your family and they watched you from day to day, motion to motion, action to action, what would they say? Would they say your family loves God with everything in them? Let's even talk about Sunday mornings. How would, if they were watching a TV movie of your family on a Sunday morning, from the time the kids get up through lunch, what would they say? Do we look like the families that love God with everything in us? We need to be looking at God through the eyes of this, like this baby is. That we need to see everything through a lens of what is pleasing to God. Everything we look at should be looking through that lens. Cool? So I believe that God desires for the family, identity of families, to be God's. We just saw that. He wants to be our God. He wants to be the only God we serve, and he wants to be served with all our heart and our soul and our mind and our strength and all that, okay? But he also wants it to be a discipleship center. You see, we just heard this command, okay, I want to love God with everything. How do I do that? God, being the great God that he is, and the Bible being an amazing book that it is, he answered that question immediately in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 6. And we look at that and we read, and it says, these commands that I give to you today are to be upon your hearts. Okay, I got that, God. I got it. I want to love you with all my heart and my soul, and these commands are on my heart. And then he says the next thing. Everybody hold a fist up like this and a hand up like this. And this is the NIV translation, which I love it. We go, impress them on your children. Right? And I'm not just talking about a fist of impression. So let's do that together. Impress them on your children. Leave an impression, a mark. These commands that I give you, these commands of loving the Lord your God with all your heart, make sure that you transfer that faith, that you make an impression of these commands on your children, the children in your midst. You leave an impression of who God is on your life. You leave that on your kids. You see, discipleship is actually really easy. The making God, that's hard. But for parents, discipleship, and for all of us, discipleship is really easy. And people are like, what are you talking about, Marcus? It's so hard to tell my kids about Jesus and how I would do everything. Baloney. Discipleship is easy because we do it every day.